Maine has always been known for its boat and shipbuilders, starting with the 50-foot pinnace Virginia, launched on the Kennebec River in 1608, the first boat built in the New World by Europeans. Maine's coast has been a center of boat building ever since. By the 19th century, Maine yards were sending their ships around the world. And down the length of the coast, countless boat shops crafted small vessels for fishing and trade. Mount Desert Island, on the Downeast coast, grew famous for its finely crafted boats. And today that tradition continues with names known for their skill and the beauty of their work. Stanley, Walls, Bunker, Clements, Hinckley, Ellis, and Rich.
My name is Robert Rich, from Bernard, born 1940, and been a boat builder all my life. I wanted to build boats because my family was a boat building family. I was born and brought up in the boat building business, and I really enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed it ever since.
Robert Rich Jr., known to his friends as Chummy, owns Bass Harbor Boat and is at least a fifth-generation Bernard boat builder, though the family tradition likely goes back a few generations more. His great-great-grandfather, Morris Rich, built ships, including a 200-ton brig and 2 schooners in the 1800s. Morris's son-in-law, Elias Rich, built houses and skiffs. Their son Clifford, Chummy's grandfather, decided to do the same. In 1910, his first customer wanted a boat. After that, he stuck with boats. All 3 of Cliff Rich's sons, Chummy's father Robert, and his uncles Ronald and Roger, decided to build boats. It was only natural that Chummy should follow in the family trade.
In his last shop, which is where I am now, I think in the late 30s. He was a boat builder, house carpenter, and spent most of his time building boats, because like I said, he never got around to building houses. But his parents were boat people. They built boats. And my father started building boats 1939, give or take a little. And then the war came along and he went to work for the building government boats. And I think about 1942 or 3, he started his own shop, and both of his brothers started with him.
There is something about wooden boats. It gets into the blood, and it got into Chummy's blood early.
I was probably 7, and I'd building rafts and kid things. That is my second boat as kids build boats. This one actually floated. We had to bail quite frequently, but it would actually float. It was built down Bass Harbor Boat on the beach, probably late 40s, and it was just built out of supposedly scrap lumber, but we might have got into the good stuff a little bit occasionally. And it took a lot of bailing and a lot of fathers caulking cotton and coal tar, but it actually would float. I built my first real boat when I was 13 or 14, inboard powered boat. It was built nights and weekends, and with considerable amount of help from my father and some of his crew. That was 16 feet. But for the time, it was a big, bulky 16 feet. It was a difficult one to build because it was so full forward. We had to steam every plank we put on it. They just wouldn't bend around there. But it was a real stable, bulky boat, and worked out just great for what the fellow wanted it for. fishing for herring and towing doors around, and it worked out great. It was an interesting project at the time, because I thought I knew everything, and come to find out I didn't. But it turned out fairly well. It actually worked, and it was in the fishing business for quite a few years.
I've heard him tell a story about wood shop. I think it was in high school, where the shop teacher, might have been the first day of school, said to Chum, "You can probably teach me a thing or two." So if you just, stay out of my way, I'll stay out of your way. So Chum would just, go on and do his own thing for that class. I think by the time Chum was 15, 16 years old, he was probably quite a talented woodworker. And he's not just talented with wood, it's mechanics, it's everything. He can think things through pretty remarkably.
Summers, Chummy worked for various island boat builders and did some fishing and crewed on a yacht as well. After he graduated from Pematic High School, he settled into his craft.
In the fall of the year I graduated, I started for my father, and that would have been in 1958, the fall of 1958. That was in Bass Harbor. It was in Bernard, on Bass Harbor, it was on the water. I started there on hull number 96 and stayed there until late 80s, early 90s, and then moved up to where I am at the moment. My grandfather's original shop.
After his father's death in 1982, Chummy and his younger brother Walter took over the business. Walter moved on to fishing, and today Chummy continues a family tradition that is deep into its second century. It's a long line and a famous name.
Chum has people come from all over the country that if they're in the area for the summer visiting, they stop by the shop. Your dad built my father a boat, or my grandfather, and I remember coming by the shop, and it's incredible. Just this summer, a fellow, he must have been in his 80s or 90, came by and said he had a Bobby Rich boat and had it for 30 years and loved it, and just wanted to stop by and see the shop and just get a feel for it. There's just something special about it. Aside from the nice ride and what I think is a superior boat.
Well, I think people come to Bass Harbor Boat to get a boat built because of the reputation and relaxed atmosphere. It's not a high sell outfit, and I think they like to play a part in the building and be part of the whole thing. My boat from Maine to Venezuela, most of them are between Maine and Massachusetts, because a lot locally. Bass Harbor Boat, as I have it now, is a continuation of what my father had. And that was kind of a continuation of what his father had. The Bass Harbor Boat has turned out something in excess of 200. I have built close to 100 since I started with my father. And some of them most of them were wood, probably 25 of them were fiberglass boats. And some small pleasure boats up to 57 foot.
Bill Jenkins is a friend of Chummy's. He had had several boats over the years, all fiberglass, and had sold his last one after his wife became ill. He and a friend were building a 13-foot dory at Chummy's shop, a dory designed by Chummy's grandfather, Cliff. At the same time, he was looking for a new fiberglass powerboat. Chummy suggested he go with wood.
Chummy, in the first 3 weeks, told me the benefits and enjoyment of a wooden boat. I've known Chummy for I don't know, 20, 25 years, and I thought I'd give them a try.
The reason I chose this model is Bill wanted a wooden boat. He wasn't necessarily interested in a lot of speed. He just wanted a traditional Maine wooden boat. And we have 3 of these locally that are still around after 40, 50 years. And he went and looked at one of them, actually looked at all 3 of them, and decided that's what he wanted for a boat. Yeah, this vintage is a 1950 style boat where they used to have the tumble home and long, narrow boats that went good with small power. And the tumble home is left over from the old sailing days. The turn of the bilge was the strongest part of the boat, and they wanted that banged up against the dock rather than the deck, loosening that part of it up. That was kind of a leftover. Well, this boat is kind of one of my favorites. It goes real easy through the water. It's an easy riding boat. It doesn't thrash and bang, doesn't pound. It goes easy with small power. The handle's good around the dock. It's just, you know, for the size of it, it's an all-around good, comfortable boat.
Bill decided to name the new boat Andromeda. Bill named Andromeda in honor of his wife, who had had a star in the Andromeda constellation named after her. They had named their earlier boat Andromeda, and it seemed right to keep the same.
She's 28 feet, 8 foot, 8 inch beam, and she draws 2 feet 10 inches. Oh, it's small, and it is very seaworthy, and it is a heck of a ride. She's a beauty to drive.
When we started this boat, we had to loft the whole thing. We had some drawings, but they weren't complete. It's kind of hard to explain the process of lofting, but basically you take a half model of a boat and slice it into slices. Vertical slices, horizontal slices, and diagonal slices, probably on a 45-degree angle. And the outside dimension of those slices is the actual boat. The lofting is part of the laying it out full size on the floor to make all the patterns for the molds and the backbone. It gives you a full-size picture of what you're building. It would take probably 5 months to build Andromeda if you didn't have to do all the lofting. There's a lot of time involved in the lofting, making the molds, making all the patterns, coming up with all the angles and bevels, and shape of the transom, shape of the stem. There's a lot of time involved in that. I don't remember the last one I lofted, but it's been 30 years or more, maybe longer, but it's been quite a while. So trying to bring all this back together, it probably is the biggest challenge. But we did have the half model, and between the half model and what drawings we found, we filled in the blank spots and came up with almost an exact replica. And then you can retrieve the lines off the floor, make a mold, and set them up on the backbone and start building a boat.
Again, the keel has to be, you know, exact to your drawings or model. So we have on the floor full size dimensions of what the stem, you know, a real large oak timber, the stem, the keel, the dead wood, the horn timber, and then they get bolted all together to form, a giant outline of the boat. After you get that built or bolted together comes a tedious, tricky, time-consuming job, and that's cutting the rabbet, cutting the timber pockets. The rabbet is, if you picture the bottom of a boat, it's smooth. So the planking needs to die right into the oak keel. And then the timbers, the frames, are behind that, supporting that, so they have to be set back that much further into the keel.
This has to be set up at the proper angle relative to the water line, and has to be plumb and straight, because that's where the whole boat starts from the backbone. Setting the molds on the backbone, which is what gives you the shape of the boat. And they all have to be plumb, squared off so they're square with the center line, and braced off so when you bend the rib bands on, they stay in the proper place. The bending the ribbons around getting the top one is the shear line, and that has to be reasonably accurate because that's what you go by for the shear. The rest of them are just put on by mostly eyeball. There is a few reference points you go by, but mostly it's just done by eye. And they're put on so you can bend the timbers inside of that.
You have your timbers all cut, ready to go. They've been kerfed, which is simply a cut up the middle, leaving 4 to 6 inches at the bottom together.
The steam box set up outside of the shop so that the excess steam goes outside, not inside, because inside makes so much moisture, rusts all the machinery.
And then they go into the steam box, and I think we can fit 10, 12 at a time in the steam box. They steam in there for an hour or so, and they get very pliable. Then you'll have a fellow handing them to me or to whomever's in the boat, and you walk them into the boat. And you jam it into the timber socket down in the keel, make sure it's a nice fit, and then you put your foot on it, you hold the top end, and you simply walk it right into the shape of the boat, the ribbons, and secure them with nails temporarily. They set quickly. If you don't move fast, they start getting hard again where you can't bend them. So you don't have to run from the steam box, but you have to move quick.
Well, the challenges of wood are not all that great if you understand the wood. You have to pre-drill everything before you fasten it. You can't just start pounding nails in. Wooden boats, there are no straight places, so everything has to be bent, and everything has to be sawed to fit or made so that it will bend around the curve. And there's a few things, but basically it's not rocket science by any means. This is how you get the shape of the plank. It's called spiling it. You bend the batten around at its natural shape. You don't try to bend it, you just bend it around the boat, not edgewise. And then you measure the distance from the top to the line you have already put on, and from the bottom down to the plank.
You start with your bottommost plank, which is called your garboard plank, which is also one of the more difficult because it's got a lot of shape to it, a lot of bend, twist. Crucial to a boat's construction and looks are the layout of the planks. Getting each line just right so that it looks good to the eye and it also is structurally sound. And that's Chum, just with experience, looking, saying, I want that plank to go here and that plank there and end that here. And they have to get smaller up at the bow, at the stem. If you think of a wood boat, there's all these little narrow butts coming together, and it needs to all look right.
The process of caulking the hull with the caulking cotton, you put it in the seam. It kind of looks like it's rolled, but it actually isn't twisted. It's just the way you put it in. And then you take the caulking iron and drive it in until it's in by 1/4 inch. You put seam compound over it, and then paint over the seam compound.
And we've had boats in here that Chum built, Chum's dad built 50, 60 years ago, and the cotton is like new in there. It's incredible. If the planking job is nice and tight and the boat's been cared for, the cotton will last that long.
The building of the hull on a wooden boat hasn't changed much in the last 70 years probably. They've made some minor changes, few minor under the water changes in the design. But basically, when I started in the late 50s, they haven't changed much, very little bit.
Well, Chum drew out the rudder and then cut the rudder out of oak, and then I had to bolt it to the rudder post. So you've got a round rudder post that now a piece of oak has to hit with a little bit of round on it. The holes are pre-drilled in the shaft at the machine shop, and I have to cut a hole all the way through that thin piece of oak without wandering. And that's what I was doing, standing on the bench so I could see what I was doing, no guesswork there. Floor timbers are a very structural part of a boat. They hold the keel to the boat. Because if you think of the boat, you've got this massive oak keel that hangs down in the water, and then this skeleton of a boat connected to it. And the little ribs or timbers come down and just attach to the keel with 2 little screws. Over time, they're not going to hold much, but those floor timbers are a massive piece of oak that sits in the shape of the boat, has to fit perfectly. So that's holding everything together. It's holding its shape, holds the engines up, holds everything comes off of the floor timbers. On this boat, on Bill's boat, we have plywood decks. So therefore, the plywood sort of just molds to the shear, to the deck line of the boat, and holds its shape there on the sides. On the bow, yes, and all the way at the back, you have deck beams that this all nails to and gives it the shape you're looking for, to shed water and give it strength.
The boats have changed over the years to accommodate more horsepower mainly, which translates into more speed, and because the fishermen want to get out there faster and haul more traps. Pleasure boaters want more room. Boats are a lot fuller forward to hold the engine up now because they like to push the engine further forward so they have more cockpit space or more cabin space. And boats have generally just kind of expanded, higher, wider, longer, and a lot more horsepower.
Once you've got the hull taking shape, basically all together, your floor timbers in, you put your engine beds in, you need to know where your shaft's going, your shaft angle, shaft line, that's all done. So now you get the engine in there, lower it in onto the beds.
In this case, we lowered the engine in because we were real close on space, and then figured out the engine beds to gain all the room we possibly could.
You do a lot of figuring beforehand so that hopefully it just drops in and everything's very close, so it's just minor adjustments. And that's the way it went. Went well. You know, now you've got the hull built, the deck's on, possibly the cabin, and you think, boy, you know, we're almost done here. The boat's really taking shape, but you're actually probably not even halfway there. Once the cabin is built, now you get to finish off the interior. And that starts with a sheathing, you know, on the sides, the insides of the boat. And it can be as simple as just V-bunks or shelving or, you know, elaborate a head, a galley, cabinetry, and, you know, customized to whatever the owner wants. Bill wanted a comfortable weekend cruising boat for two. And he, I know, wanted a sink, a stove, a stand-up head, heat. He wanted it simple, but what they call the Herreshoff finish. You know, a semi-gloss white with mahogany trim, varnished trim. And it looks good. It's simple, but yet very elegant. It's, you know, you go down below in an old boat, finished that way, and they always look good. It's a nice traditional boat. You put up a solid piece of stock for your cabin, for your shelter front, your windshield, your trunk cabin sides and front, and then you can stand back and decide where you want those windows, whether it's the portholes, port lights, or the actual windshield. And because even though it's on the drawing, you know, things look a little different when you're standing back looking at the boat than on a piece of paper. So you can eyeball it, what looks good to the builder. You've got the hull built, the cabin roughed out. Next, you're starting to think about the platform, which everybody likes to see completed. It makes it a lot easier walking around and working on the boat. But before you get to that, you've got the exhaust to install, the steering system, which means, you know, setting up the tiller, running the hydraulic lines up to the helm station. You've got to build that, a steering box. You've got the fresh water system, the propane system, the fuel tanks, the fuel lines. All of these things you have to try to plan and install before the platform. Then you put the platform down, and now it's really starting to take shape. Then you finish it all off. Lots of sanding, priming, sand it again, paint it, maybe sand it again. A lot of the boats that leave our shop have a lot of paint on them, some varnish, you know, enough to make them look good. Generally, the finishing off of the varnish takes, you know, at least 7 coats, sanded in between. Painting the hull, you paint it, prime it, sand it many, many times in between. You know, sometimes it'll have 8 different coats of paint sanded almost down to nothing again. And every time it gets a little bit better, a little bit smoother. So there's a lot to getting it finished, looking good.
Andromeda is everything Bill wanted in a boat. An efficient, easy-riding weekend cruiser that is a joy to own. And she is made of wood, in the tradition of great Maine craftsmen. It is a tradition that we hope will live on for a long time.
For some reason, it just seems to me that, you know, a wooden boat does have somewhat of a soul or something. Something about it makes it special. It's the wooden boats that people come up to you and say, man, that boat's beautiful, or that boat's special.
I definitely prefer wood over glass. I was born and brought up with wood. I like to work with wood. Fiberglass has its place, and I realize that, but I still prefer wood. It's a lot better to work with, and it smells a lot better. Wooden boats are like stagecoaches. They've kind of outlived their time, and it's hard pressed to find anybody to build a good stagecoach now, and same with wooden boat.
There definitely is still a strong market for them. People who know the difference and really appreciate a traditional, simple, well-built boat, can still come to a shop like ours and get a lot for their money. Something custom built to whatever they want.
I think it had been 25 years since I've built the last wooden boat before this one. I think for a long time to come there will be people that want wooden boats.